Hi, Julie.
Good morning, Drew. How are you?
I am excellent. We have solved the blab technology.
We have indeed.
And it's somewhat appropriate that you've logged in as cmobook.com. And since you are in CMO Book, and that isn't the entire purpose of this, but while we're talking about that, Julie is in the CMO's periodic table. She is on the discussion of tiny budgets.
It's so tiny you had to write it on a whiteboard.
Well, we're trying to do that bring in a little technology magic to this blab here. So first, Julie, introduce yourself. What's your job? What are you doing? What's going on?
Well, my name's Julie Garlikov. I head up marketing and sales for a skincare startup called Nuvesse Skin Therapies. And we have a brand in the physician dispensed channel called Nuvesse MD, and are just commercializing a consumer brand called Revelations RX.
Cool. All right. And how long have you been in that job?
A year and a half.
Okay. And then the other thing in our interview for the book, you were at another small company, but a lot of people have probably heard of it, called Tarani. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe we'll start there, and then we'll work our way to Nuvesse if that's okay.
That makes total sense.
So you had some interesting challenges at Tarani. It was a product that people tended to find out and discover through other channels, not your own, and that created different marketing challenges for you. How did you sort of talk about the distribution and how that affected how you approach marketing for Tarani?
Tarani's a really phenomenal brand and the leader in the coffee house channel. Like when you go to get your latte or you go to drink a drink in a cafe, most of the time they have the leading share, and one of the ingredients in that drink would be from Tarani. But of course, because it's back of the house, meaning it's not something you're always buying for yourself at the grocery store, consumers weren't as familiar with the brand name itself. And we actually had a pretty sizable consumer business at specialty retail, Walmart, grocery stores, things like that we really grew like crazy during the time I was there. We added e-commerce, things like that. And you really have to start building brand awareness and brand affinity because people didn't have that one-on-one relationship or recognize the product as directly, kind of visually from seeing it, but they didn't know the name.
Yeah, it's sort of there. You see it in the background. There's the syrup stuff, but you don't know whose it is. So,
exactly.
So talk about what were some of the sort of, if you will, tiny budget tricks that you used to help stretch every single dollar while you were at Tarani?
Oh, I think it makes a really big difference when you're working on small budgets, which quite honestly, even at Pepsi, my budgets were very small. So I'll say this isn't true just of a smaller company environment. Right. It's true everywhere today. I think it's important to be really thoughtful about where you spend your resources. So I think some things can be done very well in-house. Like I had an incredible creative services director who did phenomenal work in-house, but we also used agencies or went outside for a lot of work as well. And I think you need to balance where do you need outside resources and where do you want to go in-house. The other thing is to find partners that really are the right size for your business and want to grow with you. And I think that one is incredibly important.
Right. So you had some tricks. So we were on a panel together at the CMO Club Summit, which was really fun. And you had mentioned some interesting tricks in terms of, well, one, we talked about what you did send to agencies and what you didn't, and how you sort of helped stretch the dollars. You want to talk about that and your approach to it? May make some of my agency friends cringe, but let's get it out there.
That sounds great. So I'm a huge believer in making sure that you've aligned with the right partners who are the right size. And one of the ways that I found to do that best is to find smaller agencies, small to mid-size, where the owner or the person who built the business, it could be a combination of owners, comes out of the bigger agency world or larger companies, meaning they've been very well trained. They know the landscape. They've worked in larger budget environments. So they're really, really well-versed in strategy and in creative, but they wanted to create a different kind of environment or a smaller boutique or something like that and build something that was a little bit more local, but they're still involved day to day in the business. So you get their strategic thinking along with their more junior folks on the team. So I tended to find across the board agencies like that to work with, and found that to be the best thing to manage the size business that I was.
Okay, so small agencies, I like that as a principal owner of a small agency. Yeah. And then we talked last week about, or was it just last week? We talked about how you approach research and how you really shave some dollars. And I know I'm sort of merging Nuvesse versus what you did at Tarani, but I just liked your approach to how you squeezed a lot out of your research budget. Talk about that.
So I think you have to, again, be thoughtful about always time versus money, right? And where is it worth it to save the time or money or things like that, and balance the resources on the team. So when it comes to doing major consumer concepting work or a lot of product innovation work, some of that is best left in, some of the larger firms who have consumers and panels and things where you can really reach the consumer and get a quantitative read quickly. However, when it comes to some things, like for instance, claim support and home use studies, one of the things that I've been able to do here in this skincare company is to really say, wow, if I was going to go use a major research firm and put a product into people's hands, and they keep a diary and they tell us about their experience and we're gathering data, it can cost you so much money for just a single SKU of product. So what I found is that I work with some different people who have been PhDs and researchers that are now freelance. And we actually did a lot of the recruiting on Facebook and on social media, still used all the statistical means to gather the information, made sure that we had really good questions, were very thoughtful about the recruit, but didn't do it, we're able to manage it ourselves. And it's a lot more work for me, but it saves an enormous amount of money.
How much do you think you really save by doing it that way?
Oh, for each SKU, I know I saved $80,000 to $90,000. I mean,
wow.
I did the work between $8,000 and $10,000 per SKU, and I was quoted $80 to $100 per SKU from the major companies.
So you basically saved like a 90% discount, if you will. But now, in terms of your time of staff, you must have, excuse me, you must have been a lot more than had you outsourced it completely.
Exactly. But I still found some people to help me manage some of the communications and manage it. But you're posting ads all over. You're talking to those consumers. You have to keep them doing the questionnaires. You have to get the product to them, get their honorarium to them, those kinds of things.
Right. And I mean, research is tricky because, you can you can do it cheaply, but not get the right answers because you ask the wrong questions, or you ask the wrong people, or you listen to the wrong people. How do you sort of get a sense that you are actually doing this the best?
I don't do it all myself.
Right.
I am not a PhD. I've done a ton of research, but I work with someone who now has her own business, who used to head insights at one of my former companies. And she helps me make sure that my questionnaires are meeting all the needs, and that we have enough statistical sample size, and that we do the recruit correctly. So even if we're going out to Facebook or managing bits of it more ourselves, we're still using all the methodology that you need to use to make sure that it's legitimate.
So, and again, that's where the big agency experience and having done all of that. Are there some things that when you were working at Pepsi that you just sort of like you always had, like a tracking study where you just, as a smaller brand, you just have to say, I can't have that, I can't afford it?
Yes, definitely. And even at Tarani, where we could afford to purchase those tracking studies, we were very thoughtful about how frequently. So at Pepsi, we might have looked at them quarterly or annually, and at Tarani, we might have purchased them every other year. And that was sufficient for the needs of our business. So you can be thoughtful about how frequently do you buy some of those great reports when you have a little bit less money to spend.
So, and this is one of those conundrums that I'm going to dig in on this a little bit. So depending on the kinds of marketing that you're doing, measuring the effectiveness of the marketing can be difficult, right? And you can, like, one of the things without having a tracking study, it's very difficult to measure brand health.
Yes.
So how do you sort of, with a smaller budget, not simply become a direct marketer and measure things like I did this and I got this result? Or are you essentially just forced to be that, a direct marketer, if you will?
It's an interesting question. Like, so for instance, towards the latter part of my time at Tarani, we were doing a lot more consumer marketing beyond digital, and we started doing print. So we were able to leverage the resources of our publishing houses who put out large like starch reports and things, and we could bundle that in and negotiate that as part of our buy, especially today, so that they were able to help us do the brand health and the tracking studies to see the effectiveness, at least of the print. To see the overall health of the brand and to get out there to the whole world, I did have to invest in doing one of those large scale studies,
right.
But you just can't do them very frequently.
Right. So you sort of, there's a large gap between the surveys. You do it on an annual basis, and it's a little harder to sort of move the levers with a real knowledge of what it's impacting other than the sort of that direct response nature.
Exactly. But you can see if your overall marketing mix is working. Like if you have a new digital campaign and you're doing supplemental things and you're doing a lot of outreach to consumers, if your sales are all lifting, you might not know exactly which piece of it till you dive deeper is the one working, but you know overall your brand is growing.
Right. So let's jump to Nuvesse and let's talk about your challenges. Your challenges there. And it sounds like you have two separate ones. You have a consumer brand and a pharma, a medical brand, and that must. So now you've taken a tiny budget, you've divided it in half, and you have two completely targets and different expertise. How are you dealing with that?
Well, that's, I just got out of a meeting talking about that same thing, which is how do you do it? And I think it's that we had a certain kind of technology. And when you have a brand in the medical channel, you can't have that same brand in the retail channel. So that is, so we're using the medical channel as sort of a validation channel. And we're putting only so many resources into it and really focusing our main expense, our main bulk of the budget as far as the consumer marketing is in the consumer space. So the medical is about getting it into the practices, making sure the doctor and their staff is really recommending it. They are our marketing, if you will. So getting those teams of estheticians well-versed, but not necessarily doing a lot of marketing beyond that, if you will.
So that they're like a backstop. If the consumer says, hey, is this a good product? They're there to sort of they're not going to reject it, and perhaps they'll even endorse it.
Well, they're your selling team. They're selling it for you. So getting them galvanized, helping them understand how it fits into the procedures they're doing, the skin care process that they sort of go through in the practice, they're selling to their patient base. So we're using them as an extension of our brand.
Okay. So let's talk about, again, when we're getting at the research, it sounds like you did a lot of different types of research. Let's talk about the insight that you think you found that really has helped propel your marketing. Because, that's got to be a big part of this. Is in order to be efficient, you have to be really well targeted. So you're really well targeted, but you still need an insight on that specific group, right? And that's what the role is. What was your insight, if you can talk about it, and how did that translate into some sort of effective execution?
In which regard? Like my one big aha of how?
That'd be good. That's all right.
I think it is really that combination of, I think today in marketing, you need to be right between being highly analytical and being intuitive and creative. And so sitting somewhere in the middle, I think is really one of the things that I think is just one of my strengths, but also where you need to sit today to really be able to glean what's the data telling me. And you can do study upon study, whether you do them cost effectively or spend a ton of money on them. But if you can't turn those insights into, information that's going to change your product strategy, your channel strategy, how you go to market, I think that's the key. So what you have to understand as you work on a business is where does it make sense to make those investments and where does it not? And if you make one and then question, was it worth it? You probably should go and do it differently the next time and learn from that, because you just have to be kind of continuously learning. There's no simple answer to these things. But in many cases, I would say, figure out what it is you're trying to learn, or figure it out what it is on your business that you think isn't working, and get a lot of perspectives as to how to solve or answer that question. Then you'll think through a work path that might be more cost effective to get there if you really spend the time thinking through what you're trying to solve. Right.
So was there an aha moment for you this time?
What do you mean this time, Drew?
Well, with Nuvesse versus Tarani. Or let's talk about an aha moment in Tarani where suddenly the target and the message became clear and you went, bingo, I can now execute with brilliance and confidence?
Well, I did go through like a really iterative process to get the messaging right at Tarani. And there was that aha moment when it came together. But it came from walking around. I did ethnographies locally, which was very cost effective, but went into people's home to understand their behavior, shopped with them. And this was for the retail business. So to understand, like, how do we get people who've never heard of this brand into the franchise and learning about it? And so it was a combination of that, and then creating all different positioning statements and actually spending time one-on-one. I think we went through about 75 different positioning statements in iterative groups. Like, we would test 20 or 25 with a group of people, one-on-one for the day. And then we'd see what was working. And then the next day we might write more. And I worked with a fantastic team. It was really creative. We collaborated. We'd take the learnings from the day. We'd try a bunch of new stuff. And we were really seeing, like, what are the words people are responding to and what makes sense. And we landed on authentic coffee house flavor, which made complete sense for the brand that's the leading brand in the coffee house. Is, we're about flavor, we're authentic, we're the real deal. Right. And, oh, by the way, you've had us at the coffee house. And it was just so easy for people to get their head around, because we had thought the way in might be around entertaining or flavor variety or other things, even around healthy lifestyle, because we had a very large sugar-free business. But it was really around that authenticity.
Right, which makes a lot of sense. I'm still marveling over 75 anything. I having worked on brands, I don't think I could come up with 75 different positionings for any brand.
I can't tell you that every part, there might have been, the body was different, but I mean, we literally wrote constant, like, new positioning statements and put them in front of consumers. And we did it quickly over a few weeks with local people that we brought in very cost effectively. And that's how we got to a really strong positioning statement. Then we can go out and test it and see if it's working. Right.
And then from there, with that position, how did you bring that idea to life cost effectively? I mean, how do you because it's great language, but you have to make it real, right? You have to execute. What kinds of things? We've never really talked about some of the executional things that you did.
So what we did after we landed on that positioning is we actually went out and did like a little test locally around 4 or 5 grocery stores. And again, I worked with kind of an innovation partner and consulting firm to help me execute some of it. But what we were doing was trying to understand what moves the needle on this brand. So we tested and made special displays, and we got the retailer's permission to do small size, like trial pack, like variety trial packs. We'd never done that before. We test price point. We test couponing. We test digital around the store. We tested a number of different tactics, as well as sampling in store. We also did sampling like at local train stations and festivals and things to understand where did we get the best conversion in. And then I modeled out, like, what would it cost to do that on a regional or national basis to start really investing in marketing. Because at that point, we weren't doing a lot of, outside of a little bit of digital and social, we weren't doing a lot of those traditional kind of marketing tactics to the consumer, and we weren't sure which ones would work.
Right. So that brings up an interesting question. And you had mentioned when we in our panel this sort of test and roll out, or actually I think you had much more elegant words, trial and then roll out, whatever it was. Just talk about that. So when you did this test of all these things, did you say, okay, this kind of sampling ended up working really well, and then you did in fact roll it out? Were there some aspects of those tests that worked well?
So what we did is we learned that sampling was really important, and that people needed to taste the flavor, of course, in a finished coffee drink, or understand, and they also needed to learn how to use it, because remember, the barista is the one making the drink. Right. They needed to see how easy it was to make coffee at home and to add the product to their coffee. So we did do some tests, like with Walmart, where we did the traditional sort of hire the company who does the sampling on the weekends, but we also did this really innovative road trip, if you will, of like almost a pop-up store that was highly experiential. And we partnered with Gensler, who's a phenomenal architectural store design firm, and created a real experience. And we went to festivals, and we went to food events, and we went all over the country. And what you did there is you were able to buy drinks. You were able to go in the back and sample all these really fun flavors. You could buy the product and get it gift wrapped and take it home, or you could buy it off an iPad, depending. And so it was a way to kind of immerse yourself in the brand and build the brand. part of that, we were doing as much for brand experience and to build kind of the love of the brand as we were to get the word out and do sampling. So, but that was how we found a more innovative way to do it that was different than just the people that you see in the grocery store, you know, on a typical Saturday or something like that.
Or apron and
yeah, because you can really own the whole experience when you do it yourself. It is an investment to do that kind of grassroots marketing, but it does build like a real affinity, and it just gives you so much content on social. You have so many consumers engaging with the brand, and we wanted something that was much more, you know, again, going with the authentic, something that was a very authentic connection with the consumer.
Right. So let's talk about social, as I think the social media we might have talked about 4 years ago would have been very different than today, right? Because we could have built a fan base on Facebook. We might have had 15% organic reach of our posts. Now a big brand might get 0.1% organic reach. Smaller brands, if they're lucky, might get 1 to 2%. Where does social fit in on a small budget, in a tiny budget practitioner's mind?
Oh, I think it fits in so much, and particularly now in the beauty space that I'm in and in skincare, when you look at how people purchase, it's solely from, you know, a lot of times word of mouth, a friend telling them, somebody in a store telling them. Like, it's really important to have those influencers talking about you. So my entire social strategy is working with incredible kind of beauty, lifestyle, skincare people, getting them engaged in the brand and having them write about us as a way to build credibility for a brand new, you know, because we're a brand new brand. We're not owned by one of the big guys, and kind of build it from the bottom up. And that we're just getting started doing it, but I think it's going to make all the difference.
And so would you describe that as an influencer program where you're sort of identifying people who, you know, whether they're, you know, beauticians or whatever, that have influence in your category, and and how are you building those relationships?
We're partnering. Either I get to know them, my PR firm might know them, my agency, like somebody who knows them and has an affinity with them, will do the reach out, and then we start to build, you know, a relationship with them. We have them try the product. You know, they learn about it, and if they love it, they'll share it with their audience if it makes sense. But they're sharing it because they love it and because it's something that they're recommending. So again, I think that's a great way to build credibility.
Now, we have a question. Occasionally you'll see me looking down. There's a little stream on the left that you can see there. And Evan is asking, how do you come up with all these creative brand selling market positioning statements? And I'll just, I mean, I sort of marveled at the 75. Who developed all of those?
It was a group of us. So I was working, again, it was myself, a couple people on my team, very creative. There were a few people on the kind of innovation consulting team. We all came from consumer, food, research backgrounds. So we all had slightly different spins. We'd worked across, you know, a lot of them had worked across many categories. And what we did is we first identified probably like 15 or 20 different areas where we thought we could take the brand, almost like platforms. And then we worked on different reasons to believe, different benefit statements. So when I say there's 75 unique statements, it might be that the reasons to believe were different, but the master statement was different. But again, I think that another key in working in a smaller business or just in today's world is to bring in outside perspectives and people outside your company who are really creative and really know consumer. So I often would bring in groups of customers or different like innovation consultants for a day even, just to help with a creative process like that, even if they didn't work day to day on the business.
Right. So if you were starting your career again in marketing, I mean, one of the things that makes this easier, I suspect, for you is that you did get trained at Pepsi and that and you sort of learned what marketing is and could be, at least at a large scale. How do you sort of, you know, given it, would you start is it possible to learn this stuff at a small company, to sort of learn marketing from the ground up, or does it really make a big difference to get that big brand experience at the start of your career?
I think it depends on the small company. So, I mean, I started at Procter & Gamble. It's one of the best training companies out there. I started my marketing side at J&J Consumer. I mean, I got incredible training and I had wonderful mentors and people ahead of me, showing me the way.
Right.
I think if you go to a small company, you can learn it if you have a very strong boss or someone who's willing to make that investment in you, if you will, and has that kind of classical background or bigger way of thinking about things. If everybody is kind of a homegrown person, you're only going to know the way that small company goes to market, and you might not have been exposed to all the different possibilities that are out there because you haven't seen them. So I would always say you can get that great training more easily at the big guys because of the amount of resources that you have, and then take that knowledge to a small company. However, if the person running your team at a small company comes out of those big companies, you probably could get it there too. It depends on your leader.
Right. Yeah, no, it's funny because I started my career at Wells Rich Green, an agency that doesn't exist but was big, and then JWT and Chiat Day. And each of those agencies shaped my perspective and approach. But at some point, the entrepreneurs in us will sort of want to break out, of the constraints of a large company. And so I guess the corollary here is that once you have this experience and know how to pull the levers, you must have more control at a smaller company. I mean, that must be the fun part of it, is that you have, not only can control the marketing, but in theory, you could probably control the product, the customer experience. I mean, you drive just about the whole 360.
Exactly. And you also know you have so much impact. So to me, what's exciting at this stage in my career is knowing how much I impact the top line, the 5-year innovation portfolio, the channel strategies. Like I can build a team and mentor and develop them. Like I feel like I can have so much of a personal impact on a company at this point and on a brand. Whereas in a larger organization, you have great impact on the piece that you work on and you learn a ton. And I think that's a fantastic experience, but you can't always see as much your individual impact on the business because it's such a large business. So that, there's pros and cons to each, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking back to my days on Warner Lambert and working on Listerine, and it would, you'd work with a product manager maybe for 6 months to a year, and they had a very short window to have an impact, and maybe they might be able to impact a campaign, but they might have left the business by the time the TV actually aired.
Exactly.
Right. And then, so the one big innovation that they might have come up with, we should move from glass to plastic. It would take 18 months to actually get to market. And so the impact, they would have moved on, and so that would have been an interesting one. How long does it take you to get from, hey, we should do this, to actually getting something in the marketplace?
Well, that's it depends conversation, Drew. If it comes to like, we want to go do a piece of research or we want to get something started, I can have something done in 3 or 4 weeks. And then if you're talking about a huge new product launch and all the things that are involved and literally starting at ground zero from a formulation, you're talking about a year to a year and a half. Even 2 years if you hit some bumps along in the R&D process. So it depends. New structures, certain things are very time intensive and take a lot of work and engineering, and other things you can go extremely quickly.
Right. All right, I'm going to circle back because Craig had a question on traditional versus sort of viral social in terms of approaches in terms of effectiveness, and is it an either or kind of a thing, or is it just an and in terms of sort of traditional? And I don't even know what traditional means anymore, but right, I mean, because digital is traditional. So, but in terms of the balance of your energy, in terms of actually driving awareness to sales, where your investments go, how much can you rely on social to drive your business?
I think it's a good question. And I think it depends on the category that you're playing in. So for instance, in the beauty space, I think PR and social and along with maybe some print or something that targets that female shopper, can really be a full media. I mean, you can be around digital, social, but that influencer and PR side make so much of a difference, as well as your store environment. Whereas in the food categories or beverage categories, it depending whether you're a snack or whether you're an ingredient or whatnot, you have a lot more people to reach. You're in a lot more doors, so you might need more of a mix of traditional. And I just don't think social alone gets you there unless you're in like a snack category where sampling and social could potentially get you there. So I really do think it's category dependent. You have to know what motivates purchase in your category.
Okay. So first, I have to ask you, where are you right now? Where's your office?
It's in the Bay Area, over in the East Bay part of the Bay Area.
So you see the trees and the window in the background, and very nice. And what's the weather? Because it's a little chilly here in New York.
Well, it's just, we just moved from summer, it feels like, to fall yesterday, but it's still going to be like a high 70 degrees today. So I can't complain too much. But it rained last night. So I think we're heading into fall.
Wait, it rained?
It rained a little bit here in the Bay Area, which we're thrilled about because we're having a drought.
Yes. Okay. Well, we've now covered the weather. When you look at what brands do you think are killing it right now? When you look for inspiration, what brands do you look for and admire in the marketplace?
Oh gosh, that's a really interesting question. I think, like, if I was going to think of a snack that's done a brilliant job, or a food, I think Kind Bar and Chobani have both been incredible brands. One of the brands I love as a competitive brand of the one that I work on now is one called Tasha, which is a prestige skincare brand that's new. So, I just think, you look at, I think Fitbit's done an incredible job. Like, it all depends what category you're looking in, but it's somebody who comes in and,
by the way,
exactly, they come in and either reinvent a category or just do things differently. Like, I was just talking to somebody about Crave jerky. Well, jerky's been around forever, but Crave really premiumized and reinvented the category and made it more delicious and natural. And so, there's brands like that in every single space that I admire right now.
Well, I'm going to, so what's funny, you mentioned Kind. So I interviewed Daniel in the book, Daniel Nuvesse, who is the founder of Kind. And first of all, he is a kind guy, which is amazing. And his story is phenomenal. I don't know, have you heard him speak?
No, I haven't. I just eat his products all the time. Yeah.
And, he fundamentally believes that he can solve the Middle East crisis through commerce.
Wow.
And so his first company was these product that were all the vegetables that came in it. They were like dips and things and hummus type stuff, came from all over the Middle East. They were packaged in Israel and sold in the U.S. So the idea is if you could get various countries to work together. And while he was doing this product and kind of struggling, frankly, he started to do marathons, and he was doing a marathon in the Middle East and realized that there was nothing really healthy that he could eat. And so he started this Kind product. It took him a while to formulate it. But what's so impressive is the role of social purpose in his thinking and how that makes an impact on his ability to recruit. The sort of all of the marketing is about, being kind, and he'll, instead of sampling one, they'll sample two, and they'll say, I love what you just did there, like giving a seat on the subway. Here's two Kind Bars, one for you and then one for you to pay it forward.
Oh, that's amazing. That makes me love the brand even more, right?
And he does that, these, as he calls them, random acts of kindness all the time. They've had interesting struggles. They don't always get it right, but their heart's in the right place. The sales are, I don't know if he's going to hit $1 billion this year, but they have just been on a wonderful growth trajectory. And, I'm like you, I love the product and keep them around and feel pretty good about eating them.
Yep.
He did a number of things that are different. I mean, the transparent packages. I mean, think about snack bars. There really were none, right? They were all foil encased.
Exactly. And everyone's copied it too. And just the focus on the nut and being able to see the ingredients, and the kind of stores they went into at first too, just where they located themselves.
Yeah, so they kind of did a lot of things right. And I'm curious, if we're moving to a different element here, but I'm curious in terms of whether or not you think you have a strong purpose in your current company, and if that's one that helps drive your daily business or your affection for the company.
Well, for me, the purpose here is very much about the science, and the vision of the company is to bring a higher level of clinical efficacy and clinical proof to the cosmetic sort of beauty space than what's been done before. So we're trying to really mesh kind of the medicine side or the medicinal scientific side with the beauty prestige and bring them together in a really real way. And so the research that we've done is really spectacular, and it's what I'm proud of, and why I came is because it's rare to find people whose claims are, I should say, are as real or as studied as some of ours are.
Right. It's funny. I was having a conversation with, there was an article that came out, I think yesterday, and it was quite a buzz on social channels about maybe antioxidants maybe aren't necessarily all they were cracked up to be. And we're getting to the point where the Woody Allen sleeper movie is absolutely going to come true, that all of these things that we thought were good for us are no longer good for us, and the things we thought were bad for us. How do you make, and how do you, so do people then, so you have all the science stuff, right? And it says that it's good for you. Do people believe the science?
They do if you have real science. I mean, that's the thing is, like for us, we looked at it and said a lot of skincare companies are founded around miracle ingredients, if you will, ingredients that do, are going to save everything on your skin, are so fantastic. And we actually said, no, we want to work only with ingredients that have been incredibly well tested and proven by dermatologists over like 20 to 50 years. And we want to actually get them into the skin. So it's a really different way of thinking about the skin and then actually being able to prove that it works. So it's a bunch of scientists and geeks and, people like that who founded the company. And it's pretty impressive when you look at it.
No, that's really cool. I have been, thinking about purpose branding for a long time, and I kept trying to think about, well, what's Renegade's purpose? And so, I think recently we started nailing it. We've been talking about this notion of eradicating ad pollution.
Oh, interesting.
And because if you think about it, is if you look at an ad and it's just so horrible that it, you have a visceral reaction. It's like, oh my God, I have to get that out of, and marketing doesn't need to be that. Marketing can actually be a service, and we believed in marketing as service for a long, long time. It's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, is I felt like there's a lot of learning that we could share. How do you feel about that notion? Is that you think I have a viable idea with eradicating ad pollution as a purpose for an agency?
I think it could be. I need to understand what ad pollution is to understand more about it, to see, or should it be a higher order purpose, like about the kind of communication that you do or things like that?
So the ad pollution would sort of guide our, like, we won't do spam, right?
Okay.
No, email spam. And the notion is, can marketing always be of value? So is it something that there's genuine utility, whether it's educational or entertaining, but it's not simply a message to sell a product with no clear reason for a consumer to exchange, no value exchange between the marketer and the target.
I think that's fantastic, and that could really guide all your team and the kind of work that you're doing and what you show clients and what you put out there in the world. I would, and then that means it has to be relevant to the target, right? Not everybody might see it that way, but people who are interested in that content, that's who you're talking about. Yeah, exactly.
And you're absolutely right that what is value to someone, and I'm going to bring up a way back when I actually worked on a hemorrhoid remedy. And what's interesting is, as pregnant women get hemorrhoids, and they didn't know they were going to get hemorrhoids. And the word is one of those words that is a polluting word. It's like we all go, oh, yep. But at the moment that you actually have the problem, you're incredibly interested. So that's a bizarre tangent, but there is value for those people to actually talk about it. And so there is a sort of that, I've just created an interesting conundrum for myself is how would you do hemorrhoid marketing without creating ad pollution? Oh, we have a new visitor. I'm going to let Chris Yates join in, and hopefully he can move us well beyond hemorrhoid. Chris.
Yes, I'm 100% on board with that. Let's get rid of ad pollution. Spamming should not be anywhere in any marketing strategy whatsoever. Why do you want to, let me ask you something. So a consumer wakes up every morning, right? And the first thing they think is, man, I hope I get spammed 100 times today. Please spam me today. No, everybody wakes up, they want valuable information. I love your concept.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, where are you calling in from?
Dallas, Texas.
Awesome. And you're using your phone for this, aren't you?
Absolutely. I'm actually getting pretty good reception.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's one of the things I really like about the Blab platform is that the app works pretty well. Hey, Chris, what do you do?
Go ahead.
That's great.
What do you do?
Well, I was a sportscaster for 20 years at Fox Sports, and then created a video content marketing firm in 2008, which I was a little bit too early on that.
Yeah.
Social media, I think Facebook when I started was only 1 year old. So it was kind of a little baby. And, we just I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. So I loved your idea of, I had to pop on when you said marketing is of value. That's exactly my goal as a broadcaster was always this. I never sold anything. My goal was always the end user, the end viewer. What did they care about? That's what I wanted to give them. So that's kind of my philosophy right now.
That's great. And do you have any questions for Julie while she's here, being an expert in tiny budget optimization and marketing whiz in general?
Yeah, I'm just curious. For you with a small budget, I guess really the only thing you're giving up really is your time, right? It's all about time and energy with your concept. Is that correct?
Well, to some degree, I think that it's about who you work with, and it's a think about making those, like, where do you spend a lot and where do you spend a little? And when you're going to spend a little, you're often going to put more time in, or your team's going to put more time in. So you have to understand that, at least to get a really great result.
Now, let me ask, do you mind if I ask another question? So
no, go for it.
On this kind of philosophy as well, which I think there's a huge advantage when you say doing it on a tiny budget, you're more swift than the bigger agencies. You're responding better on social media, and you're more involved. So in a way, this is a very positive thing, isn't it?
I think so. I think you're also closer to your customers and consumers because you have to be, right? And because you're doing a lot of it, or your team is themselves in conjunction with partners, you're listening more. And I think you're hearing more. You're not like 3 steps removed from everything.
That's awesome.
That's yeah, Chris.
I love it. Well, I don't want to take up a seat for y'all. I want y'all to get somebody else in here. I appreciate you guys getting me on, and I like your philosophy. Sorry, I'm wearing the sunglasses. I'm on a jogging trail right now. So.
All right.
Yeah.
You're looking good, Chris.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Y'all take care. Great show.
Okay. Bye. Hilarious. Nice. I love this platform because it is so easy for people to jump in and out of, and there you have it. That's my first phone call in, Julie. But I was on one the other day where someone actually phoned in from an airplane.
Oh, wow. That's pretty impressive.
I know.
I wonder how their seatmates felt about that, though, Drew.
Well, yeah, that's always, it's important to be thinking about those people around you. But you know what? He could have had his headphones on. These days, no, he could have been marginally quiet. Well, let's sort of wind this down for a moment and get this to some summary items. If I were you have a friend who's about to take a job at a startup, not unlike yourself, what would you say their top priority should be in terms of looking at their marketing and sort of getting things together?
I think you've still got to do all the work. So when we're talking about tiny budgets, I don't want anyone to think that means that you're cutting corners or you're not doing the steps. So you've still got to go and figure out what's your consumer proposition? What's my strategy going to be? How am I going to bring my brand to life? How am I going to articulate it visually through storytelling? What are the channels I'm going to use to reach my audience because they're the most relevant? How am I going to differentiate? Like, you've got to do all that thinking and get all that work done. It doesn't just magically happen, but there are ways you can do that work in more thoughtful ways about how you invest the money. So don't skip any of the steps. Don't say, oh, I'll just get to the brand later. Like, if you don't start with your brand and, understand what it is you're putting into the market and making sure your technology is super innovative and that the benefits you have actually matter to your consumer, you're not going to have a company that's going to go forward.
Right. So, yeah.
So all the fundamentals remain the same.
Really good product, customer centricity, have a plan.
Yes.
And
do the work. Just do the work differently. Think about how you're going to do the work and find partners to help you do it. Manage with combinations of freelancers and agencies, and kind of think about how you resource differently, especially at a startup where you might not need them full time. Work with people who really believe in your product and your company's vision too, because then they'll be just an extension of your team.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So, and because being on the other side of this thing, there's always a conversation. I want you to be a partner. I want you to be involved. And one of the things that has never ever happened is, wow, that worked. Even when programs worked 5 times better than was expected, the reward is simply you get to keep working with us. It's not, and this is, I'm not bitter, but I'm just saying, have you figured out a way so that you're really partnering? So when some of these folks are investing a little bit more in time and energy, maybe not charging the full rate, that there's an upside down the road other than being able to continue to work with you?
We haven't figured it out exactly here, but in talking to my CMO Club peers, there are companies and I know agencies that end up with equity or shares or different, have different models like that. We're talking about when they're making really big investments. We have yet to have needed that level of an agency's support, but I think if we did, that would be a way to creatively structure something so that they really do have skin in the game. Yeah,
I think that, and that I see that happening more. I think it's tricky as an agency head. I think it's really a difficult combination to balance because, when's that liquidity going to happen? How long? Who gets it? How do you? So it's complicated. But I do think that's one of the things that our industry collectively needs to solve somehow.
I think there are people doing it, and they take like 1% of their revenue and say, okay, it's almost like venture money for them. We're going to put the time into a couple, but we can't do it for everybody. Be very selective, and then maybe one of those stakes will turn into something. Right.
So, all right. So we've got a good list, a to-do list of things as a marketer getting started at a startup. Are there some things that should be really avoided? I mean, like just whatever you do, don't do this.
I don't know if I could say that so universally. I mean, what I would say is just don't skip any steps. Don't cut corners and try and skip some of the things that drive revenue. The other thing I would not skip at a startup is focusing on your top line and your revenue. So figure out your sales strategy, get out there and start hitting the pavement early and often, and make sure if you need help, get the help early, because if you can't get the revenue going, you won't, it's a cash flow thing in a startup. So that's a very important piece. Don't take forever to do it.
And, I just sparked one other question, which is often in a startup, the founders, like you mentioned, your scientists, they're not marketers. They don't speak marketing. How do you overcome that hurdle? How do you create some common language with them? They know product development, and they might even know a distribution channel, but they sure as heck don't know how you build a brand.
No, they don't. And it's a challenge. I mean, and it's especially a challenge when you don't have a lot of other people who come from a marketing background or a consumer background. I'm fortunate here that people see the value of marketing, but I think you can do it by doing little tests. Like, it's amazing. Like, for instance, we just had a PR hit that went on TV. We had someone talking about us on TV, and we suddenly started getting all these orders in that market. And I didn't know for a few hours that we'd gotten this amazing press. It's really obvious when people see that, the value of marketing.
Right. Yeah, well, that's amazing. And I think that's a great place to sort of wrap things up. I mean, wait, you got on televisions, people saw it, they started ordering it directly. That's
exactly.
Yay!
I know, it's fantastic. And it really helps people see like why we're doing it, right? Why are we doing these things?
Which is good, because we are doing these things and we're doing them every day, and they do make a difference.
Exactly.
Very few products sell themselves. So with that, Julie, thank you for joining the Elements of Marketing. Feel free to drop by on our next one. We're doing these every Monday and Friday. And again, just thank you again for joining the Elements of Marketing. Have a great afternoon.
I will, and thanks again. I love the new format. I love the blab.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.